All right, let's talk about some defects in wood. Introduced defects into wood. So when you cut a piece of lumber and it does all kinds of reactionary movement when it's cutting, there's a lot of tension in the wood. And that's what I've got going on here with these pieces that are, for the most part, no good from the original intention. So this is what was supposed to be a, what's the right word I'm looking for? It's not a memorial box, that's what it is. It's a memorial box out of walnut. And as I'm rough sawing these 8/4 boards into 4/4 stock that I can let acclimate over the weekend and come back and mill down to their final size a few days later, I ran into a problem that most of this is not usable lumber for this particular project. You'll have to cut it up into smaller pieces in order to be used. So first off, this is just a 4/4 piece that I resawed off a piece of 8/4 that was supposed to be a lid, right? So about 12 inches by 11 inches was the final size. And as I cut it, as soon as I cut it, this thing popped open and warped like a mofo. So this is, well, not warped, this is cup, right? A lot of internal stresses there. There's, even with this being 5/4, not 5/4, even with this being 4/4 and me trying to get down to 5/8, there's still too much of a cup for me to use this piece for this particular project. So these two came off the bandsaw just like that, right? A huge warp, boom, as soon as it cuts through on the bandsaw. And when you see this much movement immediately right off the saw, odds are, in my experience anyway, like disclaimer here, I don't claim to know everything with defects in wood, but every time that I've seen this much movement right off of the saw blade, it leads me to believe that it was a defect introduced during the drying process, specifically what's commonly called case hardening. So it's kind of hard to describe over just me right now. So let me put this image on the screen. So if you'd like to test to see if a piece of wood that you have has been case hardened, then those are the cuts that you need to make and look for the outcomes shown on the screen. But, so this was one piece that was kind of disheartening because that's the largest piece that I needed. And then I got to cutting into some of these other sections of this 8/4, and once again, got boom, right off the saw, and literally boom. As the last piece, last little bit is being cut off, you hear like a loud pop. The tension in the wood is being released a little bit. And this one, I think it's this one. So this one, as it was being cut, let me just show you half of it at a time. You see this right here? You can see into the fibers. These are just spreading apart. All this tension released real fast. So this is, in my opinion, not really good to be using to try and keep messing with it to get it down to its final size, because there's so much tension built up in here, and you're just going to be chasing it. You know, it's just going to continue to move with you. So that's one side. This is a book matched. Obviously, it's resawn, so the exact same thing going on right here. You can see inside the grain where it's just spreading apart in that direction. So if it's spreading apart in this direction, you know, wood typically doesn't move much in this way. Trees expand and contract with their diameter, not their length. You know, trees don't get shorter as they dry out and longer. Typically, anyway, they expand and contract like I do when I eat too much. So that's one of them, but this is the one that was like just a real bummer. So again, taking 8/4, resawing it into 4/4, and boom, right off the saw, quite a bit of movement. And in this one, you can see a lot of cracking and splitting. Is that showing up? So the reason I bring this up is I posted some of these pictures online, just kind of a bummer kind of a day. It happens, you know. And I had a lot of people ask me, Well, why can't you use that? Why can't you just put some bow ties in there or stabilize it with epoxy and use it? So, I mean, I guess you could, force a lot of epoxy in there. First off, there's a lot of little cracks that are just too predominant for this small of a piece of wood. It's not worth saving, in my opinion. And number two, even if you do stabilize these cracks that are already here, this is indication that this piece of wood's got a lot of tension in it, a lot of stresses in it. So anything that you do to it, you're going to change those stresses, and you're just risking this thing to just keep screwing up and keep releasing tension as it gets down to its final size. This is what I call frustration, right? If you keep working with it, you're just going to be frustrated. It's better to just cut your losses and turn it into pen blanks if you want to keep it. So that's these, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about what's going on with this stuff. So case hardening is what all this leads to. And I looked up online to try and learn a little bit about case hardening, and I found this little forum thread from woodweb.com. I'll have a link down in the description if you guys want to read it. But basically, this, where did it go? Oh, I skipped a page, my bad. So, case hardening, as you appreciate already, has nothing to do with hardness. It results earlier in drying when the shell tries to shrink because the fibers are drying under 30% moisture content, but cannot. So the shell is trying to shrink because you're drying it, but the center is not allowing that to happen. So it builds up all this tension on the perimeter of the shell, case hardening. At the end of the drying, when the moisture content is uniform, there will still be this shell that is larger than the core. You cannot case harden dry wood. So if case hardening was caused by restricted shell shrinkage, we can offset this by adding water to the shell to try to get the shell to expand. Of course, the shell is limited in expansion, so the attempted expansion offsets the earlier attempted shrinkage. So we are free of case hardening or drying stress. The key is to add moisture quickly, as adding moisture slowly will only increase the average moisture content. Heat makes it happen faster. One way to add moisture faster is to cool the lumber a bit before steaming. Case hardening does not go away with time. Note that planing the wood does remove the case hardening stress. However, plane only one side of the case hardened lumber and the piece will cup dramatically as the stress in the shell of the unplaned side is still there. So there you go. If you plane one side or manipulate one side of case hardened lumber, the piece will cup dramatically as the stress of the shell, stress in the shell of the unplaned side is still there. So it'll cup dramatically. Let's go back to this one, right? When I cut this in half, this interior section of this side over here, right? This board over here, the interior side, is no longer being held in place by this side, and it'll cup dramatically because that tension's still there. So this is a great example of that, right? And if I'm wrong on any of this, discuss it down in the comments so we can all learn from this. I don't know much about this. I'm just trying to learn too and keep a conversation going. And then there was a conversation back and forth about bowl turning and cutting in that and all this. So the next reply that's interesting is, case hardening is not caused by quick drying or the heat. The quickness is how we offset case hardening, more technically called tension set. It is true that air-dried lumber has little case hardening, but that is because of the high relative humidity every single night, which makes sense. Every single night the humidity just goes through the roof, especially here. So that's adding moisture to the shell of the wood every single night, and then it dries throughout the day naturally. The temperature is not a major factor. It is the humidity. It is mainly the humidity. There are a lot of people that learned air drying can go too fast and check and honeycomb the wood. If you get a crack, then we know you also had case hardening, as case hardening occurs prior to cracking. When the PL, I don't know what PL, when the PL is exceeded and we are in the plastic range, which occurs before the ultimate stress level is exceeded. I tried to avoid a highly technical discussion about stress set, plastic range, elastic range, PL, and so on. Case hardening is well understood and can be technically explained. It is also true that wood can be dried very slowly and case hardening avoided in that manner. But such slow drying is hard to achieve and would result in mold, mildew, etc. It is true that cutting a bowl in half can also show growth stresses as well as case hardening stresses. However, we are fortunate that most US woods do not have much growth stress. The cutting will also show tension wood and compression wood stresses. So, I don't know, I found that interesting. I guess that's it for this video. I just mainly wanted to explain the question of why I couldn't keep using these boards for this project by stabilizing them. There's just too much stress built up in the wood, and you're just going to be chasing the stress as you mill it down. It's never going to cooperate. It's just going to continue to be a pain in the you-know-what. That's it. You guys take care. Take care. I almost said carrot. And I'll talk to you later.